Welcome back. We're talking about the ongoing challenges in Zimbabwe now, 1 year since the end of Robert Mugabe's 37-year rule. Let's get back to our panel. Let's go to London. Let's go to Joseph Ochieno. And Joseph, do you believe that the new government under Emmerson Mnangagwa is adopting the right policies to get Zimbabwe back on track? You know, we've just heard a whole load of criticisms right now. Businesses in Zimbabwe charging foreign currency, which is in short supply, the use of the bond note, which is supposed to be one-on-one in value to the US dollar, but is trading on the black market. I mean, what's ahead for the country's economic future?
I think, as I said at the beginning, economically, I think it's rather difficult, very, very tough for Zimbabwe. I'm not quite sure what alternative the Zimbabwean opposition, for instance, if Nelson Chamisa had won the elections, what programs they would be having on the table. As I said, Zimbabwe was clearly on a hold. What the ordinary Zimbabwean in Zimbabwe wants, and I think what the ordinary Zimbabwean in South Africa, who are there in big numbers, and probably in the broader diaspora beyond the continent, what they would want is there a possibility, for instance, for those in the diaspora, if they went home into Zimbabwe, is there a possibility they would have jobs? Is there a possibility that, you know, whatever monies they would have would make any meaningful gain? Is there a possibility that they'd be having hope for getting basic essential products? It is just not possible considering where the country is. And if I may say so, if you look at the wider, broader, relatively stable African countries, whether you talk about Ethiopia or Nigeria, that have really not gone through the kind of experiences that Zimbabwe went through. And I'm not making an excuse for the Zimbabwean authorities. These guys still jump the sea in order to travel elsewhere. I think, to me, the challenge for the Zimbabwean government is this, that they should actually show, and Chipo may have a bit of a point down there, they should actually show that they're different. They should actually show that they're open. They should actually show that there's a possibility for a genuine national reconciliation, number one. Number two, politics, as I said, is a massive thing for which perception is extremely important. Zimbabweans need to know that, once again, they're together. That having been said then, it's only from then that they can begin to focus on the real key issues. Most of the things are actually beyond the demands of this government. Other than that, as I said, gold and diamond production, you know, in the plus. The agricultural production, particularly tobacco that Bright was talking about, in the plus. I think by and large, the vast majority of the Africans in Zimbabwe have generally benefited in the last year, probably actually 2 years beyond even the time of Emmerson Mnangagwa. The issue then is, what is the international community doing, and why are they so slow in responding to the call by the new government that they actually genuinely knew? Unless there is a genuine and deliberate injection from outside, I'm not quite sure whether anything is necessarily going to change substantially over the next year. But quickly, do you know, if you see the Zimbabwe that I part so on a few occasions, including on my visits, what will happen is there is the rich and the poor. There's hoarding, there's speculation, and there is the divide between the rich and the poor. In a situation in which the political class is not cohesively united, there will be speculation, and it's going to be very, very difficult for them to be able to check on the inflation. And so it's not surprising that we're actually having the debate between Chipo and Bright.
Chipo, as Joseph points out, the key to Zimbabwe's fortunes would lie perhaps in there being something of a positive response from the international community, which has not been there so far. But I want you to listen to the views of two Zimbabweans. One is a political analyst, the other is the Deputy Minister of Defense and War Veterans. Let's listen to what they had to say.
We still have laws that were there during the Mugabe era, laws which are repressive, and laws which tend to turn away investors.
We still have problems because sanctions are still on us, and the aim of any sanction is to destroy the economy of the sanctioned country. And here we are trying to wake up, and yet someone is pulling us into the grave.
So, Chipo, that's a dilemma that Zimbabwe faces. What do you make of those comments?
You know, I also come to this conversation not just as a young Zimbabwean, but also as a business owner in Zimbabwe. And what I can tell you is that Zimbabwe, like most African countries, isn't poor, right? There's actually an advantage to not getting additional loans, to not getting chalked up under conditionality from the IMF and the World Bank, which is what you get when you get a lot of aid. The challenge in Zimbabwe is that there is just a lot of corruption. The country loses about $1 billion to corruption every single year. Let me just repeat that. $1 billion to corruption every single year. To fix Zimbabwe's problems, you don't need a lot of money. So what the executive needs to do is to really clean up corruption. We could borrow money today. A couple of years ago, there was money that was brought in from the Chinese bank. That money was supposed to go into fixing the water systems in the country. The government or the people that were involved have not been able to give a tally of what happened to that money. The only receipts we've seen are receipts for new car purchases for the elites that were involved in the deal. So we could get more loans. Somebody could give us $20 billion. We got diamonds in 2009, right? We sold diamonds for at least $15 billion, which is 3 times the budget of what Zimbabwe needs annually. Where did the money go? It all went through corruption. The money was lost through corruption. So this argument that Zimbabwe needs to be able to borrow more money, Zimbabwe needs to be able to be, to have loans extended, that's useless unless the government is willing to actively deal with corruption. There is money in Zimbabwe. There is money that's come, until last year, people were transacting in US dollars. There were US dollars in the country. The question is, where did that money go? The elites are not suffering. Just yesterday, we were seeing that government officials are able to buy cars at least $1,500, a $40,000 car being sold to somebody for $1,500, and the pain goes to the taxpayer. So a lot of the work needs to be done by Emmerson Mnangagwa and the executive. They've taxed people now. They've added a 2% tax. And that's great, but to what end? And where is the money going? If you're going to tax people, then you have to invest in education, you have to invest in healthcare, you have to invest in the roads. So unless Zimbabwe deals with corruption, that is the big problem. Nobody wants to come and invest their small or big business in a country where they know that the money is going to be lost.
Right.
How do you trace the money?
Okay, let me go to Bright Matonga. Bright?
Yeah, I think what Chipo is saying, these are basic challenges that any country faces. As I indicated before, Zimbabwe, the president has really opened up to a lot of things. He's been in office for 3 months, not a year. And in terms of corruption, there's been arrests. Then people would say, they're not going to be convicted. Again, that's a judgment. But the good thing is that there is goodwill. I spoke about the Transitional Stabilization Program, which has to put Zimbabwe systems in place before we get to get any debt or any support. We have to show that we're opening up for business, we're putting up systems. And I'm happy to say that we're doing that. Even Moody's ratings, they've given Zimbabwe a positive credit rating, which is the first time in as many years we've never heard about Moody's ratings on Zimbabwe, which is good. The minister is in New York. He has met business people to try and build confidence. But, we're talking about 30 years. People can say Miss Rue or whatever they call it. These are challenges that, any country would face. But what is it that the government is doing, this new government is doing to make sure that there is positive development first at home, and then abroad.
Okay.
So really, there are challenges, and the government is doing everything possible to make sure that Zimbabwe gets back to to the international stage again.
Okay, Nhlanhla, on the question of international help for Zimbabwe, foreign aid, South Africa is its big, powerful neighbor to the south. South Africa, of course, has its own economic and social challenges. But what role can South Africa play in getting Zimbabwe back on track?
Well, South Africa, as a big brother, stands as a potential funder or a potential source for investment going into Zimbabwe. But I think the message that President Emmerson Mnangagwa has sent to the rest of the world to say that Zimbabwe is open for business is one that seems to have resonated with the rest of the world, even as close as South Africa, because South Africans are very cautious as to how can we assist a country which seems to be in a bit of a shamble right now, and that poses a lot of uncertainty, especially with regards to issues around corruption and a lot of observations around just the repressive state that Zimbabwe still finds itself in. A lot of investors or a lot of businessmen, even in South Africa, find themselves very wary and posing questions as to whether Zimbabwe is Zimbabwe really a safe space to invest in its current state.
Okay, and that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.